Call the meeting to order. And for the allegiance, please. Join in here. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, are there any comments from the public on non-agenda items? Seeing none. Corrections to the agenda or consent calendar?
We do have changed the agenda. There's a change to item 4C, the Tahoe pump station replacement project. The changes to the change order amount in the requested board action by $90 to the district's benefit, and that will be reflected anytime that number is mentioned throughout the agenda, as well as the total contract amount increasing by $90. And if approved, the requested board action will read: 1, approve change order number 3 to T&S Construction in a credit amount of $19,512.07, and 2, authorize the general manager to execute change order number 3. So that change is being requested, as well as on the addendum. It's been requested to take that action item as E instead of G, since it falls right after the same presenter, Mark Shilo, for the item just before that.
So 7E is being replaced. We have F is going to be the election of board officers, and G as well. Okay.
I'll move the agenda as amended.
I'll second that. And that motion passes unanimously. Now we have a
presentation, item 6. Sorry, no.
Thank you. I didn't have the agenda.
Move faster here.
Good afternoon. This is ready to go. Perfect. Thank you. My name is Justin Williams. I'm an audit partner at 9 CPAs. I'm here to present the audit results for the district for this last fiscal year ended June 30th, 2024. Our firm's been doing the audit for, I think this is the 6th year now. And pleased to present some really good audit results again. And then once I go through the presentation, if you have any questions or anything, feel free. Questions about the audit or the financial statements or anything. So one thing I'd like to remind board members as well as members of management, the financial statements themselves as well as the internal controls are the responsibility of management. And then it's our job as the auditor to come in and form an independent opinion on those financials to let the user know whether or not they're fairly stated. So that's the goal of a financial statement audit, is to form an opinion on the financials. Now, a little bit about how we got here. We break up our field work into 2 different phases. The first phase is our interim phase, which we did in June. We perform the interim field work remotely. A lot of what we do during that time frame is a lot of planning. We review things like all the board minutes since the prior year's audit. We have discussions with management. And then another big part of that is looking at your internal controls and the processes you have in place. Even though it's a financial statement audit, a big part of that is looking at your controls. So if we're going to have any recommendations, it's usually as a result of this part of the audit where we're identifying the different control areas. I've listed out there some of the different areas that we look at. Receipts, revenues, any revenue coming into the district. We'll look at disbursements, expenses, and as we go through each of these areas, the types of things we're looking at are things like segregation of duties. You don't want one person having too much control over a particular financial process. You want those segregated as much as possible. Other things we're looking at are for things like management approval, evidence of that approval, and so as we're looking at your controls, those are the types of things we're looking at to make sure that they're strong. So we also look at HR, payroll. On the HR side, we're looking at making sure we look at new hires, terminations, making sure people are getting, those are approved, people are getting paid appropriate rates. Also look at the payroll process, is it being done timely, is it being properly approved? also the financial reporting side. That's where we're looking at things like our bank reconciliations being done timely. Are they being reviewed? They look at what types of financial reports go to the board as well. So those all play a part in your internal controls that allows us to gain comfort with that and then ultimately form an opinion on the financial statements.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
In terms of our controls, I mean, they're pretty static, right? We don't really do a whole lot of manipulation of those over time, right? And they're pretty consistent. They have been consistent over time?
They have been, definitely. So different reasons that controls could be changed if there's different changes in personnel. Here, things have been pretty consistent, so the controls have been designed so that even if somebody leaves, they were designed for that particular position, so somebody else can just slide into that position and those controls still exist. Where there could be changes if you have changes in the number of people, and then those could move around a little bit. With an organization or district your size, you have enough people in accounting and finance to be able to have adequate controls. Sometimes when we have smaller districts or smaller organizations that maybe only have one or two people, it's a little bit more of a challenge to make sure that you have adequate controls. There are definitely ways to do it, but it would be things like the board would be much more involved than they would be a larger organization, as an example. Next part of the audit is the field work. I think is what most people think of when you think of an audit. It's a testing of the numbers. And so it's a testing of the balance of the year end. It's a testing of the activity throughout the year. So that field work we perform in September, which is timely for June 30th year end by the time accounting and finance get the books closed, get the audit schedules ready for us, provide us with the trial balance, give us a little bit of time prior to that to do our planning, get things in place. Then we come out and do the actual field work, and that's done on site. Give an example here of the different types of tests that we do when we're looking at those balances and activity. Cutoff testing, that's a big one. I mentioned on the previous slide, or listed there, that risk assessment is one of the things that we do as part of the planning process. Cutoff is a little bit riskier, and so what that means is throughout the course of the year, organizations and districts are usually really good at doing day-to-day processes, day-to-day accounting functions. When you get to a year-end or a cutoff, there's different types of entries and different types of processes that have to be done. And so there's just a little bit higher risk. And so we concentrate a lot of our testing on that cutoff. So we'll look at transactions prior to June 30th and then transactions into July and August as well to make sure things are recorded in the proper periods.
So when you say risk, do you mean the possibility of it failing, of a control failing, or how do you measure risk?
Sure. So a lot of different ways. The majority of what we look at for risk is different types. Fraud risk is one. So if there are areas that could be more susceptible to fraud. One of the things, thank goodness, that people are getting a lot more away from is cash collections. And so that's receiving cash, obviously, is more susceptible to that, so that's a higher fraud risk area. When it comes to risk on the financial statements themselves, there are some things that are riskier than others in terms of the likelihood of them being incorrect or misstated. Things like prepaid expenses, not a very high risk area. Accounts payable, accounts receivable, a little bit higher risk, mainly because of that cutoff. And so it's higher risk because we need to make sure that things are recorded in a proper period. So it's not necessarily fraud risk, it's more on the financial statement side as well, but we do look at the fraud stuff too. Another example of different types of tests are analytical review procedures. These are things like we'll do variance analysis, where we'll look at accounts over several years and see if there's any unusual fluctuations or things we weren't expecting. We'll do things like ratio analysis, where we're looking at average salary per FTE or average benefits per FTE or average benefits as a percentage of salary. So it's a way to look at a lot of information at a higher level, and if anything unusual pops out, then we'll drill down a little bit further and look into that. Confirmation of balances, this is a really strong audit test that we do where we send third-party confirmations directly to financial institutions that confirm directly back to us, so investments as an example. This used to be a paper process, but now it's all electronic, but essentially we get, with your sign-off, your signer's approval, it's all through this confirmation.com that everybody uses, but the financial institutions confirm directly back with us, and that's a good way for us to verify that the balances that you're reporting are in agreement with what they're saying you have. Last one there is detailed transaction testing, and that's really just where we select different samples directly from their accounting system and transactions throughout the year, and then request the supporting documentation to make sure that it's recorded correctly, classified correctly, and the amounts are correct. Next one here is the federal single audit. Any organization in the U.S. that receives more than $750,000 in federal funds in a given year has to get this additional single audit, and you've met that threshold. There have been maybe 1 or 2 years where you haven't hit that, but we did have that this year, so those are additional procedures. I'll talk about that one in a second. And then putting together the financial statements and footnotes to make sure that they're in accordance with all the different GASB requirements. And so the result of doing those different procedures, there are 5 different reports or letters that we issue to document the audit results. First one's our audit opinion, independent auditor's report. Next one's the government audit standards report. Then we have a single audit report, and then 2 separate letters, the board communication and then the management letter. So I'll talk about each of these. First one here is the main one. This is our independent auditor's report on your financial statements. Goes at the front of the financials. There are 4 different types of opinions that an auditor can provide: unmodified, qualified, adverse, or disclaimer. Unmodified is what you want, and that's what we have here. So we spend about 1.5 pages to tell you that, but it's a clean opinion on the financial statements that says the financial statements as presented are materially correct. So definitely good news there. Next report we issue is called the Government Audit Standards Report. Because you're a governmental entity, you have to be audited under these government audit standards. The majority of the governmental audit standards fall on us as the auditors. We're required to have additional CPE, professional education. With all of our staff who are working on these types of audits, we're required to have different controls in place in our own internal control systems to make sure that they're subject to our different inspection procedures and approval procedures. But the way that the government audit standards affect you is that when we're looking at things like your internal controls, if we identify any weaknesses in those controls, we're required to put those in one of 3 categories. Material weakness, which is a major issue with internal controls. Next one down is significant deficiencies. If they don't rise to that level, we can report them on a separate management letter. If they're considered to be a material weakness or a significant deficiency, they get reported under this government audit standards report in the schedule of findings. As you can see there, good news, no material weaknesses, significant deficiencies, or compliance exceptions. So definitely good news there. All right, next one here is the single audit, the Uniform Guidance Report. Again, this is the one with the federal funds over $750. There were 2 programs that we're required to test this year. There's a specific calculation we have to follow to determine which ones have to be tested. Essentially, it's if there's any of the programs, so not only if your total federal funds are over $750, that means, yeah, you have to get a single audit. From there, we look at them individually by individual grants. If any of them individually are over $750, that means they have to be audited at least once every 3 years. And there's a couple other things that fall into there. We also have to make sure that we test at least 40% or 20% for you guys, your low risk, of the total federal funds as well. It gets kind of complicated, but essentially we're required to test 2 of them this year. Last year we ended up having to test 4, which was a heck of a lot more work, but we did 2 here. Main thing, no compliance exceptions. We're also required to look at the controls as it relates to the federal funds as well, and there were no material weaknesses or significant deficiencies over the federal funds controls either. So again, really good news. Next letter we issue, this is a separate letter. It's a board communication letter, goes directly to you. In addition to our audit opinion, there's other things we're required to communicate to the board outside of our audit opinion, and this letter accomplishes that. We're required to let you know if there are any new accounting policies that were implemented during the year. There were none. GASB gave us a little bit of break this year. Next part of that are accounting estimates. If there's any accounting estimates in your financials, all financials have some sort of estimate, nothing unusual. We're just required to let you know what those are. Allowance for doubtful accounts, leases receivable, depreciation, subscription liability and net pension liability. And just the way that these are calculated, they're considered to be estimates, so we're required to let you know what those are. Again, nothing unusual there, though. Also on this letter, if we had any difficulties in performing the audit, this would be our opportunity to let you know that. An example of that would be if there were major delays in the audit. If we had trouble getting information, and maybe if I'm standing up here in May rather than December, this would be maybe it wouldn't affect the audit results, but this would be our opportunity to let you know that there were delays in the audit for these particular reasons. As you can see, none of those. If we had any disagreements with management, and that would be things like disagreement over accounting treatment or something like that, this would be our chance to let you know that, and there were none. Also required to let you know if there are any audit adjustments. What audit adjustments are is at the beginning of the audit, we're provided with your trial balance. After all the testing we do, if we have to make any corrections or changes, what's called an audit adjustment. Almost always we're going to have some, even the cleanest clients. We only had one this year. It was actually a really minor one. They true up the bad debt reserve balance. Also on here we have what are called past adjustments. There's different thresholds that we set as part of our audit. If something doesn't meet that threshold, then it's not required to be actually adjusted. And so we have 3 of those that are considered immaterial, so they're not reflected in the financials. Finally, we issue the management letter. I mentioned earlier that if we had any major issues with your controls that were considered to be material weaknesses or significant deficiencies, they would get reported in that government audit standards report. If we don't find any that rise to that level, more like a general recommendation, we can report these on a separate management letter. We had one of the control thing with the timely review of accounts receivable reconciliations, those weren't being reviewed timely. Recommendation that those get done on a regular basis. Next one had to do with accounting for prepaid expenses. That resulted in an immaterial adjustment, but just making sure that that's properly recorded. And then finally, the cutoff. I mentioned earlier that's a higher risk area with the accounts payable cutoff, and we did identify one area or one invoice that was a minor one that resulted in just a material adjustment. So nothing of major concern there at all. You're paying us to do the audit, so we got to try to come up with something, some kind of recommendation for you. And those are some of the things that they should work on for next year. And I have no doubt that those will be resolved by next year for sure. So in conclusion, excellent audit results. Trust me, not all my presentations look like this. We have a clean opinion on the financials, great news. No material weaknesses or significant deficiencies or compliance exceptions, just the one audit adjustment, and then the 3 material ones, and then the management letter comment. So definitely very good results. I'd like to thank Andrea and Greg, the rest of the accounting finance staff. They did an excellent job. To end up with audit results like this says a lot about the good work they do. And believe me, Andrea and Greg can attest to this, that we select a whole lot of samples and a whole lot of information, and to ultimately end up with audit results like this is really, they should be commended for that. So it concludes my formal presentation. If anybody has it.
Great work. I think that's kind of been consistent every time we've had these since I've been on the board. So, I mean, just from Paul to Andrea, I agree. Just great effort by the team.
Yeah, thank you so much, staff. Just a question on timing on making the adjustments or making the corrections. Like, what is that? Like, you're looking for that to happen within the year, and
the adjustments themselves are already done. For the management letter comments, those were probably done as we're bringing it up to them in the audit, during the audit. Again, they were pretty minor. It's not something that rose to the level of that would take a major changes in policy or something like that in order to correct those. They were fairly minor, and those would be types of things that are probably already resolved.
Great job, staff. Any other comments or questions? All right. Thank you, Justin.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Justin.
Okay. Moving on to 7A. That is Danielle.
Yes, that's me.
That's you.
Good afternoon, members of the board. My name is Danielle Morris. I'm the grants coordinator for the district, and I am here this afternoon to request that the board adopt 3 resolutions that are related to the return activated sludge building replacement project. District staff has been working to prepare an application to the Clean Water State Revolving Loan Fund for the return activated sludge pump station replacement project. As part of the application package, we are required to submit resolutions adopted by the board for the purposes of 3 resolutions. There's an authorizing resolution, a reimbursement resolution, and a pledged revenue and funds resolution. Those are requirements of the application package. And in our reimbursement resolution, we do have to specify a not to exceed dollar amount for our loan. And so for this project, that dollar amount is $19 million. I have Julie Ryan here with me today to give you a brief overview of the project and to be able to answer any questions you may have regarding the project.
Thanks, Danielle. Julie Ryan, Engineering Department Manager. Yeah, just because of the magnitude of this project, we thought it would be worth getting up, telling you a little bit about it. We had the opportunity to take Nick and Shane out to the project area, show them, kind of give them a tour all the way around all the things that we'll be touching as part of the project during the last operations committee meeting. But kind of the brief overview, the return activated sludge, or RAS as we call it, is the last of the major treatment processes that is original to the plant. The current facility was built in 1966, and it has definitely reached the end of its useful life. The building that currently houses these pumps that take the activated sludge off of the treatment clarifiers at the end of the treatment process and bring them back to the beginning of the secondary process. That building is undersized for its purpose. It doesn't provide us the operational flexibility or redundancy that we would like to have in a modern plant. It has seismic deficiencies. Not built today's seismic standards. And so after several years of evaluation of the existing facilities in which we looked at the operational needs of the plant as well as the seismic, we did a structural seismic analysis and looked at different alternatives. We could rehabilitate the existing facility or replace it with new. We found that it would actually be less expensive and give us more opportunities if we replace the facility in its entirety. Not to mention, it is much easier to build a new facility and then tie it into the existing treatment process than it is to keep the plant running while rehabilitating an existing structure that's in use. A couple other things about this project that is adding to the cost. We are also tackling the rehabilitation of 3 below-grade concrete structures that are also part of that earlier generation of treatment facilities. They were first analyzed in 2013. We received a condition assessment report from HDR consultants, which recommended at that time that we do rehabilitation. But based on funding availability and project priorities, we have not yet touched them. Over the intervening 10 or 11 years, their condition has only gotten worse, and so now we are taking the opportunity to get that work done as part of this project because it's all part of the larger secondary treatment system. But of course, the condition has also gotten worse over the last 10 years, so it is costing us more to do that than we originally thought. So that's kind of the major elements of this project in a nutshell. Anybody have any questions or anything to add?
Curious about your conversation in HOC.
Yeah, so we did a really extensive field tour. It was great. Megan was describing the project. I think it's about 90% design, so it's pretty much there. We have a good sense of what it's going to cost, and it was, eye-opening to learn. Original, as Julie said, it's all original, equipment from the 60s. So, and a pretty, yeah. So we were wondering if the cinder block building had the legal permit. But no, it's a critical project for the plant, and I think the seeing it in person definitely was eye-opening. And I think we have a good plan to tackle it, because I think a big cost of it is a lot of the bypass, because we really have to set up a bypass system to take all of that stuff offline and replace it. And I thought the plan was very well thought out. I think the time spent by staff kind of analyzing different solutions was very thoughtful and well done. So, yeah, I think, you know, Shane and I were talking about after the meeting, like, items like this, that, you know, this is a big CIP priority, you know, the operations committee should, like, make a recommendation, just let the board know that we've kind of reviewed this in pretty good detail and are comfortable, and would provide, like, a recommendation step we should move forward. But we don't have that formal process set up, but that's what we would like to.
Yeah, and I guess the other point is that we're not approving the project today, we're just setting it up so we can actually apply for a loan. That's what this resolution is all about.
Yeah.
The other thing that we had talked about is gives us more flexibility, more opportunity for more efficient pumping systems and things like that. So it's, and just upgrading everything, it's making everything more functional and easily accessible in terms of maintenance and that kind of thing. So anyway, it was a great tours. I learned a lot, and different parts and pieces to it, but they've been thinking through it, and again, 90% design, and we think this is would be a good investment, and it's time is now, and I think that's part of our mantra, at least any of us on the board is trying to, you know, build in the resiliency and making sure that our systems don't fail. So.
No, I agree with all those points. I think my only comment, and I don't think it would be in this action maybe when the formal project comes forward. You know, as we talked to Shane and I, and, you know, Paul was there and other members of the efficiency committee, and we talked about, you know, inclusion of information, and Shane kind of mentioned it in terms of efficiency. Again, I wouldn't necessarily anticipate it here, but just use that as a note in terms of, you know, what are those efficiency gains, you know, some of those things so we can start tracking it. And I won't, you know, kind of belabor the point now, you know, we've talked about any efficiency for this before, but I thought this was kind of a perfect example into that. So again, I wouldn't necessarily anticipate it here, but just as a note.
Okay, I'll make a note of it.
Yeah.
Thanks. Anything else?
Danielle?
Quick question for you.
Can you remind the board why we are applying for a loan today for a project that's not scheduled to start until at least 2027?
Yes. So the Clean Water State Revolving Loan Fund opportunity is a competitive opportunity. It is, the drinking water side has not quite reached that level, but the clean water side is considered competitive and therefore has a due date for your application in order to be included on their next fiscal year, what the State Water Resources Control Board refers to as their intended use plan. So the way the process works is for clean water projects, the applications are due by December 31st of every year. Projects that are submitted by that due date are included in the State Water Resources Control Board's intended use plan for the following fiscal year. And what they will do in that plan is they will detail all of the information regarding the funding, where it's coming from, what the level is, what the amount of demand was for that, and then they will include a few lists. Those lists are, one list is called the comprehensive list, which will include all the projects that applied for funding for that year. And then they will include what's called the fundable list, which are the projects that they have identified that have scored high enough that they want to fund those projects. They will generally select a cutoff point because all of these applications are scored. They will select a point cutoff where everything above that they hope to fund, assuming that all of the funding allocations come from the federal government as anticipated and through the sale of bonds. So that is kind of how the process works for the application. What we have found throughout the many years that we've been applying for SRF loans is that the application review process and agreement creation is extremely lengthy. So we used to anticipate about a 1 year to 18-month time period to get a funding agreement. Lately, our funding agreements have taken 2 years. So in order to set ourselves up for success, to be able to do this project when we, have planned it, when it is scheduled, we are applying 2 years in advance to ensure that we will not have to push this project out any further, hopefully, based on any delays in the funding agreement. The other thing that's really beneficial to following this procedure is that we are planning and advertising our bids for construction projects over the, fall and winter and spring months so that we are ready as soon as May 1st rolls around to get started with construction. So by applying this far in advance, we would hope to have a funding agreement by July 30th of 26, which would then, June 30th of 26, which would then give us the ability to go out to bid on this project in that fall or winter, therefore keeping the project on schedule. Does anyone have any questions about that process? No?
Are there any public comments? Seeing none, can you read us your requested action, please?
Yes, I shall. I am requesting today that the board adopt resolutions number 329924, which is the authorizing resolution, resolution 3300-24, which is the reimbursement resolution, and resolution 3301-24, which is our pledged revenues and fund resolution for the return activated sludge pump station replacement project loan from the State Water Resources Control Board, Clean Water State Revolving Fund loan. That is a mouthful.
Make a motion.
I'll second that.
Thank you very much.
Okay, moving on to 7B. Ryan?
Good afternoon, Ryan Lee, Customer Service Manager, and I have for you today a resolution confirming our 2025 water and sewer capacity fees, which does reflect a 1.6% increase over the 2024 fees. So I wanted to give you a brief overview about capacity charges and how they work. We haven't talked about them in quite a while, a couple of years since we did our last capacity fee study. So essentially the thinking behind capacity charges on the water and sewer side, so the district currently has 3 different charges for customers who are doing new development in their service area. So we have a water capacity charge, a sewer capacity charge, and a fire service capacity charge. So those are 3 separate rates, and I'll talk a little bit about what those look like. But essentially, the purpose of the capacity fee is not to increase revenue for the district, but it creates a fiscal balance between existing customers and new customers who are developing a property that will be connected to the district system. And so what the thinking behind it is that we want all of our customers to have a proportional share of the cost for existing investment that we put into the system, as well as future investment that goes into the system. So the way that we determine that, and there are California state laws that require capacity fees don't fall under Prop 218, but there are similar requirements that the costs be, or the charges be cost-based and proportional depending on who the customer is and what type of connection they're making. So because of those legal requirements, the district commissions a study every so often to, essentially it's like the rate study that you saw recently. The last time we did a capacity fee study was in 2022, and the industry standard, according to, so we hired HDR to do this study. Their recommendation is that we do a study every 5 years. The recommendation coming out of their study was that another industry best practice is that in between capacity fee studies, you have automatic annual increases based on a consumer or construction cost index. So when they did the study, and they gave us a report that it goes into a lot of detail. There's actually a lot of different methodologies that are available to different districts, and so they selected the methodologies that made the most sense for our district. So the way that they do this is essentially they establish kind of a base customer. So we have always used our single-family residential customer as what our base is. So they're looking at establishing kind of a base of a 3/4-inch water service, 1-inch fire connection, and what was the equivalent of 3 sewer units. And then essentially they take those numbers and then look at the valuation of our entire system. So they're looking at what the system is worth, and then they look at some of our planning documents and the 10-year capital plan to factor in additional costs. And what comes out of these calculations is a rate that is reflective of for new customers buying into the system. Essentially, it reflects what existing customers have already invested into our system. Again, the thinking is to keep those based on our costs, looking at, evaluation of the system, as well as planned future developments in our capital plans, as well as, having that proportionality so that if you have a larger development that will have larger demands on the system, the capacity fees are higher for those. Okay, so a little bit of history. Like I said, the last time we did a study was in 2022, and the time before that was actually in 2008. So we had a bit of a gap between our capacity fee studies, and what resulted from that 2022 study was about a 60% increase in water capacity fees and just about a 40% increase in sewer capacity fees between 2008 and 22. So that was about a 14-year period. It comes out to like an average on the water side of around 4% per year increase. So coming out of that 2022 study, along with HDR's recommendation that we include automatic inflationary increases in these fees in between that and our next study, the board adopted an ordinance back in November of 2022 to do exactly that. Using the same index that HDR recommended, which is an industry standard from the Engineering News Record, their construction cost index. So it's an index that has a certain amount of steel in it, a certain amount of lumber, some concrete, different things like that go into this index, and they track it year to year. It's big and it's used nationwide, so it's one of definitely the leading index. So what we've seen since we implemented these automatic increases is that in going from 2022 to 2023, there was a large adjustment coming out of the increase in that index year over year. So we had a 7.2% rate increase on capacity fees that came into effect January 1st, 2023. That was by far the biggest one-year increase we've ever had, not including like a big one over 14 years that I talked about. But then for 2024, we saw a much smaller increase, 2.7%. And this year, looking at the engineering CCI, we're looking at a 1.6% increase, which is actually low. Looking at the 30-year historical on that, 1.6 is actually the lowest increase that they've had in that time period. So it seems like those costs are coming back down, but this is the first time that you're seeing this resolution to confirm those. When we brought our new legal counsel on board, they recommended that we do this as a best practice, that if you have this kind of an ordinance saying we're going to have automatic index-based adjustments, they said that it's always a good idea to have the board confirm those each year so that you're having your eyes on it and there's a resolution that we have. So as far as capacity fees as a percentage of our revenue, they've always been somewhere around 2% of the total revenue, but it does make a difference on the capital side. It's closer to 7 or 8%. The money that we collect on capacity fees must be used for capital investment. So it goes straight into funding these capital projects that we have. We can also use it for debt service on those projects. So if we take money out to accomplish that, we can use those fees to service that debt. And so it really is, like I said, the thinking behind it, and it's supported by the methodologies they use to do these studies, is that it's not necessarily a source of revenue for us, but it's more about a fairness for our customers, that they're all invested to the same degree in our system, and it's based, like I said, on valuation and future plans. That said, they've been decreasing, we've increased the fees, but the number of permits that we're issuing has been steadily decreasing for years. So we do track this every year for our annual reports, and let's see, I'll give you a little bit of an idea of going back over the last 6 years. So in the last fiscal year, we always it's a mix of residential and commercial. We've had some big commercial developments, with Sugar Pine Village being the largest in the last couple of years, but we always kind of standardize this to make it equivalent to a single-family average dwelling. So this last year we issued 60 permits, year before that 75, and then going back to 21-22, it was much higher. So we saw 140, year before that 166, 148, and 138. So they've been steadily decreasing for years as we kind of get built out. We are seeing more, again, a decrease in single-family development, but an increase in some of these larger residential developments that we anticipate will continue. We're seeing more and more affordable housing projects and, higher density multifamily projects coming up. So that's kind of what we've seen over the last couple of years. In dollars, looks like they've been right around $2 million a year is pretty good average of where we've been for the last 6 years in capacity fees. So what I'm asking for you today, the resolution that you see in front of you, like I said, does reflect a 1.6% increase over last year. It's a relatively modest impact to the single-family customers. Could be more if you have a larger development. What it looks like for the average single-family, so with the 2024 capacity fees, again, we're looking at a 3/4 inch domestic water line, 1 inch fire line, and what we used as our average home size, because we now charge sewer capacity fees based on square footage, which was another change that the board made in 2022. That's been very popular amongst our customers. It's more fair, and what it really accomplished was to make it much more affordable for these large-scale projects on the sewer side in particular. So that change saved Sugar Pine Village over $1 million in connection fees. But right now, the average single-family dwelling, all the fees together would be about $24,365, and then with the proposed fees increase for 2025, that would go up to $24,762. So it's an increase of $397 again on the for a average single-family development. So with that said, does the board have any questions?
No, I really appreciate your detailed kind of analysis. You answered all my questions, actually. They were less so in terms of this action and more in terms of, kind of what had transpired since 2022, and we really hadn't kind of connected on that. But no, you did a great job kind of walking through all that, so I feel good.
What's the square footage that you're judging it off of for your standard?
Okay, so this came out of the HDR study in 2022 when we made that change from looking at sewer units being a toilet and a kitchen sink, converting this to square footage. And what they did was look at the last 20 years worth of county records for the size of new homes being built. And this was interesting because what they came out with, the basis is 2,736 square feet. So that's the average size of newly built homes over the last 20 years, but it sounds like a big house to me at least, compared to maybe most of the system, but that is what that is based off of. And then so what they did was take that 3 sewer units essentially, use this number for square footage, and then they backed into a dollar amount per square foot.
On a remodel standpoint, how many are we getting, under that 500 square foot threshold for a reconstruction?
Not many of them.
Okay.
So yeah, that was another change that came out when we made this conversion to basing it on square feet. For remodels, we do not charge for the first 500 square feet of additional space that they're adding. And this is all livable space, so we don't include unconditioned space or anything like that. And we really haven't seen a lot of those. We have seen a couple ADUs in the last couple of years. State laws have changed around ADUs, and essentially we cannot charge connection fees for a permitted ADU. So we allow the building department and TRPA to make that designation because they are the planning agencies. So what we do is if they say that something is an official ADU, then we don't collect connection fees for those. When the state laws had changed, we didn't know what to expect as far as how many we would see of those being developed as the word got out. It's really been pretty modest. So I think in the last couple of years since this has changed, we've had only a handful of those ADUs where we don't collect any connection fees. And then as far as like remodels, the biggest thing that we always saw was most of the people who are paying connection fees for sewer units in the past, they're just adding a bathroom, more or less. They're not significantly expanding the footprint. So maybe I said that wrong, Joel, because what we have seen is most of our remodels are not over 500 square feet. That's what I meant to say. Yeah.
Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah, so it's saving those customers who are just adding a bathroom but otherwise not really expanding their footprint, saving them money on capacity fees.
I know at some point an analysis has been done about how many lots are actually left to build on here, and obviously you can buy them and tear down. Do we know how many empty lots are still allocated out in the county and the city?
I don't remember. I remember that we did that, and I don't remember the numbers.
I know, like McIntyre bought the one by Safeway, knocked that building down and built 2 mega mansions or mini mansions, whatever they want to call
And
them.
most of the lots that are developed, I mean, most of the empty lots are not developable, at least the U.S. Forest Service or CTC. Over the years, the CTC has sold some of the CTC lots. So it's hard to say, but I remember that we don't really expect a ton of development, especially on the single-family side, and that's not what we've seen over the last couple of years. It's, like I said, steadily decreasing each year, but I don't remember what that number was.
I don't remember either. I know that information is available in a future water demand report that we have. I can't remember if that was KJ or Corona that did that. KJ, okay. We can get that to you if you did.
I was just curious.
Okay.
I guess I had a quick question. Did we receive any other comments outside of here? I mean, I guess I was going to call for a public comment on this item, but did we get any kind of calls in or anything like that?
Nope, and we really haven't heard a lot about it. Actually, the comments that we've received are all favorable for the change in how we bill sewer capacity fees. That was, like I said, very popular. It made a huge difference on these affordable housing developments, and I think it's a more fair way to do it. It seemed, getting away from just basing it on these toilets and kitchen sinks, people were really responded positively to that.
This is what Jim sent me day before yesterday to answer that question.
So that number doesn't include.
What?
Correct. Okay. So yeah, Jim, who's our GIS analyst, we were just looking at these numbers. So we've got just over 1,001 vacant lots, and then he's got 1,578 CTC lots and 759 Forest Service lots. So potentially 1,000 lots left. What we've seen and heard from developers is that we're kind of getting to the bottom of the barrel here. So the ones that are left, there's something not right about them. They're challenging, yeah.
Because it's 1,000 just vacant lots, and a lot of those are non-buildable.
Yeah.
Yeah, tracks right around the corner from me that are not buildable.
Just a quick question, maybe more of a comment, but yeah, no, I appreciate the CCI indexing. I'm a big fan of indexing fees to keep up purchasing power. And I think it is good to bring this to the board and not maybe in the future, like every year put it on the consent calendar, but have a full board discussion, because I think it keeps the policy kind of discussion in front of us, not necessarily the fee, but it's like, what is the connection fee and the capacity charges doing to development, or how are we responding to development, vice versa? Like you reported out, ADUs are starting to come online. There's been a lot of barriers to those that are not our fees, that we don't have any barriers now. Yeah. But those may start ramping up, I don't know, as TRPA and the city and the county start to modify their rules. And then the affordable housing projects. I mean, I think we all want to see more housing for our workforce and stuff. So the more that we can not be a barrier to those things, the better. And I think that keeps this conversation in front of us and relevant every year. So thanks, Ryan, for the good report.
Anything else? Any public comments? What is the requested action?
Okay. Staff is requesting that the board adopt resolution number 3302-24, a resolution by the Board of Directors of the South Tahoe Public Utility District confirming the water capacity charge and sewer connection fee rates for calendar year 2025.
So moved.
Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you.
That was a great presentation. Okay, moving on to 7C, Taylor, 2025 Pioneer Trail Waterline Project.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Taylor Jamie, staff engineer here at the district. I'm here today to request a board authorization for the district to advertise for bids for the Pioneer Trail Waterline project. Before that, I'll give you a little bit of a brief background on the project. This project will install about 2 miles of new pipeline on Pioneer Trail between Marshall Trail and Susquehanna Drive. Currently, a large portion of this section of Pioneer Trail has no water line, but there is a small portion between Marshall Trail and Golden Bear that we will be replacing the water line on. The purpose of this water line is to connect the state line zone with the Susquehanna and Pine Valley zones in Myers. And this connection will offer the district operations crews increased operational flexibility to be able to move water from one end of our system to the other, especially in times of high water demand. Additionally, this new line will install new fire hydrants along a critical urban wildland interface, which will help fire crews better combat fires in this area in the future. This project is being funded in parts by a grant from the EPA's Community Grants Program, a grant from the Forest Service under the Lake Tahoe Restoration Act, and an SRF loan. Currently, the total budgeted amount for this project is about $5.2 million, and the engineer's estimate came in at about $4.9 million. I want to bring to the board's attention that there were some corrections to the agenda item, and there's been some changes to the stated advertisement date, bid opening date, and recommendation for award date in the last paragraph of the agenda item. We plan to advertise starting on January 10th, have the bid opening on February 25th, and recommendation for award on March 6th. That's really it. I want to open it up to any questions that you guys have.
I'm happy we're here. I mean, I think the budget section you referenced, I think there's a lot of updates that we got here. So, you know, like all comments today, I'm great that we're finally here. And I couldn't recall how many fire hydrants were actually being installed. I know we talked about it before.
It's about 8. It is 8. Yeah.
But for so many reasons, yeah, I'm glad we're finally here. It's a great work.
Yeah, good use of grant funding, the earmark and the SGS funding and Forest Service. That's great. It leverages our resources.
Any other questions?
Okay. Any public comments? Requested action, please. Yeah.
So I'm requesting today that the board authorize staff to advertise for construction bids for the 2025 Pioneer Trail Waterline project. Happy holidays, everybody.
Okay, moving on to 7D, El Tahoe Bayview Well Backup Power and Rehabilitation Project, and then you're going to do 7E, which is the new item that was added.
Okay. Good afternoon. I'm Mark Silas, Water Resources Manager. So both of these items today are related to the recent motor failure that we had at Bayview Well over Thanksgiving. And so in advance of that, to give you guys a briefing on that situation and then to give some context to my items that I'll be going over with you, I'll have Adrian Combs come up, our Director of Operations.
Good afternoon, board members. Welcome, Joel, to the board. Loving your Christmas blazer here today. I'm here to kind of talk about our Bayview Well. The Bayview Well is our biggest well in the system. It's a 4,000 gallon minute well. It's at the end of San Francisco over by the Upper Truckee Marsh. Large producer, great water. This well's been in service for 17 years, longer. Our pumping motors lasted a long time here, longer than you expect out of a mechanical piece of equipment. Any mechanical piece of equipment and inevitably is going to fail at some point. We did see signs of this motor going out this fall, and ultimately the motor did go out here recently. We do have a known deficiency in our system, supply in the state line zone. Firm capacity is how we plan our water systems, and firm capacity is our supply with our largest pumping unit out of service. The Bayview Well is our largest pumping unit. Back when they did the water system optimization plan, they identified this deficiency of approximately 1,000 gallons per minute. When we recently had Carollo do an evaluation regarding the Tahoe Keys potential water system consolidation, it brought back to light this system deficiency. The system deficiency is when the Bayview Well is out of service. This well is now out of service. the board did approve an item. I'm not sure exactly when it was, but, months ago, to buy a spare pump and motor for the Bayview well. Great project there. We've got that on order. Unfortunately, right now, it's a long lead time item, and the expected delivery date was going to be in September. Mark will have a little bit of an update on that because we're doing everything we can to get this well back in service prior to the summer. We did not get this well back in service prior to the summer. We're looking at needing to do a little bit more water conservation throughout our system than we typically would involve like a public campaign. But, we kind of found out about this, what was this, 2 weeks ago? Over Thanksgiving. And, I've been having trouble sleeping lately, but Mark sent me a great email the other day that he's going to talk about, but it's going to require a little bit of board action. Thank you.
Yeah, so this first one, I would call it tangentially related to the Bayview situation right now. So 2 weeks ago, I came to the board and you guys approved authorization to bid for the Tahoe Bayview backup power and Tahoe well rehabilitation project. Today, I'm asking for reauthorization to bid that project. And what we're going to be doing is actually omitting the Luther Pass pump station fuel storage augmentation portion of the project. Because of the situation at Bayview, I originally had also planned work at Bayview Well to be rolled into the backup power project, which is what's reflected in the agenda. But I'll go over this in my next board action item. Based on recent availability of replacement and rebuilt motors, we feel that we no longer need to tie the rehab into this project. And so, yeah, just to clarify, the difference between this authorization and the previous is just the omission of the Luther Pass pump station fuel storage augmentation. So, yeah, like I said, I came to you guys 2 weeks ago. The estimate from our consultant was $5,522,000 for a project that included backup power at Tahoe Well and Bayview Well, rehabilitation of Tahoe Well, and the fuel storage augmentation at Luther. So there was concern about the budget, including the Luther Pass pump station fuel storage augmentation component would put the project about $700,000 over budget. It was much more than we expected. The Luther portion of the project is estimated at about $860,000. And there was an original connection between this work at Luther Pass and at Tahoe. And that connection was that we were initially planning on reusing the existing 6,000-gallon diesel fuel storage tank from Luther at Tahoe and upsizing the tank at Luther to 12,000 gallons. And this is a big operational priority for our ops department because it would increase the amount of days that we can operate in an outage from about 2.5 to 5. And so this remains to be a high priority project, but after engineering was able to meet with ops and our general manager, we decided to pull that aspect out of this project for a couple reasons. So firstly, we're dealing with a FEMA funded project, and when you include non-FEMA funded work in a FEMA funded project, then the FEMA requirements sort of pollute the entire contract, and that can drive up costs for parts that aren't funded by FEMA like this. And secondly, pulling it out would allow us to spend some additional time looking for outside funding for a standalone project. And so we've already put a lot of work into this project, and so the plan is to have our design consultant finalize a standalone bid set just for the fuel storage augmentation section. And we would basically have that on the shelf to complete whenever we have funding or whenever we can find funding for that. And so that's what we're proposing. The changes to the authorization to bid that I'm proposing would lower the engineer's estimate to $4,660,416. Another thing is that we would be able to maintain the original project schedule as planned, and so we would complete the Bayview well rehab and return that well to service as part of a separate project this spring. We would install backup power at Bayview in the summer, and that would allow us to take Tahoe down in summer 2026 to complete the work that we need there. We don't want those wells down at the same time. And so, yeah, before I read the requested action, I'm happy to answer any questions.
start a booster path. So is the timeline for that going to be predicated on when funding's available, or is there just a projected date, kind of where you're thinking of that?
We don't have,
I'm adding it to the 10-year plan for 2028. That's far enough out that if we start looking now and it's eligible for funding, we should be able to keep it on that track. But we do still have the ability to push it a little bit if it looks like funding might be available, but we need a little bit more time. Which would happen if we tried to overdue money. Take a while, yeah.
All right, what's your request?
So the requested action is authorize staff to advertise construction bids for the Tahoe Bayview Well Backup Power and Tahoe Well Rehabilitation Project.
I forgot to ask you, are there any public comments before we draw a motion? Seeing none?
Make a motion. Second.
Moving on to 7E.
Thank you. So next item is directly related to the motor failure we had at Bayview Well. So yeah, like Adrian mentioned, back in September, the board authorized a critical motor and pump backstock inventory for our key wells. And in October, the general manager executed a PO with FlowServe, which is our sole brand for large capacity wells, in the amount of $390K. They gave us an expected lead time of September 2025. They're the only manufacturer that makes submersible motors of this size. And so we kind of have to deal with what they can get us. I don't know if I jinxed it. Over Thanksgiving, our Bayview well motor failed to start. And we were thankfully able to get Eaton Drilling out of Woodland out the very next week. And they were able to pull the pump and motor, and our electrical department did some additional testing. We found that it was measuring way too low motor resistance. It was in the kilo ohms, and it's recommended to be in like 10 mega ohms, so like 2 orders of magnitude. And so we had reason to believe that the seals had failed. Our pumps crew pulled it open, and it was full of water. And so Eaton was able to help us find a specialized contractor that can rebuild this type of motor. There aren't many, but we're going to be sending it to them tomorrow for inspection. They were able to give us a quote, and I'm planning to, that should be under the board limit, so we're planning to move forward with that rebuild. However, it's uncertain really what the prognosis is for the motor until they're able to inspect it. We were not 100% sure that it's going to be fixable, but we're hopeful. And we, like Adrian mentioned, we really can't afford prolonged downtime in this well. And so I contacted FlowServe to request an expedited delivery for the motor that we had on order. They were able to bump the delivery date up from mid-September to mid-May at a cost of $58,536. And while this is, I consider it to be steep, I think that it's necessary to mitigate the risk associated with not having a backup at the station. And also, it would allow us to stay on track with our capital improvement program, because when we found out that Bayview Well was down, that really threw a wrench in what we could move forward with. We were looking at pushing Bakersfield Well, pushing out Tahoe Well rehab, and then we know what happens when we push rehabs, right? Motors go down. And so,
and they get more expensive.
And they get more expensive. And so, yeah, just as a safety measure, we'd like to move forward with expediting this. The plan is that we hopefully would receive a rebuilt motor in March, put that in the ground, make sure that it works. It would be warranted for a year. We would run it until we received the other motor in May, at which point we'd pull it out, put the new motor in, make sure that one works before it goes out of warranty. And then we'd be able to proceed with our Bayview Well backup power project, and then the following summer, Tahoe Well. So, yeah, I'm happy to answer questions on that.
So basically, we plug in the rebuilt one, pull it, put the new one in, pull it, put that on the shelf, and then we'd be ready to go if something would go south on us. Okay.
And then hopefully we'd end up with a, brand new, the pump's in great shape, by the way. It's just the motor. Yeah. No, you didn't say that. I just wanted to clarify. But yeah, so basically we'd end up with a new rebuilt motor in the ground, hopefully a nice, reliable, a new motor in the ground, hopefully a nice, reliable, rebuilt one on the shelf. We'd have like a pretty good condition pump in the ground and then a brand new pump on the shelf. So we'd be basically prepared to, if something happened, then instead of having this long wait time, we could pull it out, put the new one in, we're back online in a week. And I think that's where we need to be with our critical stations for all of them, not just this one.
So the other question was related to kind of our power service there. Is that stable? Or, because as I understand, Tahoe's got some really wonky stuff that's going to be worked on tomorrow.
It does have some wonky stuff going on. And, yeah, we've been working with Liberty for several months now on this. We have two main issues there in that Tahoe neighborhood. The first one is that we have voltage imbalance, which causes current imbalance on our motors. And so you want to keep like the current balance within about 5% on each phase of the three-phase motors, but we're seeing imbalance, and that can decrease the lifespan of our motors. Another thing that we're seeing there is over voltage. This is, yeah, in the Tahoe neighborhood. Yeah. So it affects our Paloma well, Tahoe well, and Bayview well predominantly, and some other wells. But yeah, so the over voltage is an issue. We see voltage up to like 510 volts there. It's a nominal 480 service. The well motors that are three-phase, they're actually three-phase 460. So and they only have a voltage tolerance of 10%. And so we really shouldn't be going over 506, but a lot of the time we're seeing 510. And so our electrical departments had to like adjust our VFDs to operate on 500 volts instead of 460, which is not, it gets us through, but it's not a long-term fix. And so we've been working with Liberty. They're going to be doing some phase balancing in that area. And then they're also working on the over voltage issue. They were going to do work on it last week, but then they had to cancel that because of the storms that came in. And I haven't heard anything back yet. I didn't get enough, but hopefully. Okay, correct, perfect. But yeah, it's like we've had a lot of issues with power quality. It's something that, I think we should probably start thinking of like holistically as well. The tariff book from Liberty is not super specific in the quality of the power that they are required to deliver us under certain nominal voltages, where if you look at like other tariff books for other utilities, it'll say your 480 has to be between this and this. The legs have to be balanced this amount. We don't have anything like that. And so that's something that we're trying to work with Liberty directly, but then also kind of exploring internally to see what kind of recourse we might have if we're being delivered poor quality power.
Yeah, I'm glad that's getting in front of the board, because I think it's an important issue. If there's, potential cost us and damages and other things to our equipment, we need to really pursue that. And I'm glad that's getting on the record formally, because, I think we need better service from Liberty, basically, as their largest customer. I think we deserve better. And I think I, for one, would like to see us pursue that pretty diligently with Liberty.
Are we able to trace back kind of the cause of the motor failure?
No, we're not, but it does seem like it's a seal. It's related to the seal. Okay. And we do have it on a VFD, a variable frequency drive, which does correct some of the current imbalance at the motor itself, but the VFD is still seeing current imbalance. So. And then to make those tariff adjustments, is that something that we would have to engage with CPUC, or how do we get there? I believe that is. We are consulting the legal counsel right now about that. That needs to happen. I would like to see that, get that squared up, more standardized. Yeah, that's possible.
I think in regard to the CPUC interaction as well, we discussed in the past the ability to transmit across parcel boundaries. I think that gives us optionality as well, for different spaces. So, I got a whole, long-standing issues with, Liberty and the CPUC, but in terms of like immediate actions, to your comment, the ability to transition across parcel boundaries. And then in conversation with legal, not to get up time to time, but, as we looked at the efficiency meeting to the 1 megawatt, we're now saving $8 million, where, when we did the numbers not that long ago, it was 1.2. Forgive me if I'm slightly off. And so you can see as I looked at it, we're, saving $8 million, but we could have saved 24. So I would like to make a pitch, if
at all possible for all those things as we go forward. And I know that's a deeper conversation, but just to put it out there.
Yeah, I think there's likely a focus workshop to be had over our liberty issues.
I would just one comment on that. I would say less of a focus group in terms of liberty interactions and more using our leverage points with the CPUC to position ourselves to the best benefit of our consumer and our ability to kind of maintain our system. I don't think liberty in our interactions and having here disagreement is going to be kind of forthcoming with any solution. That ship has long since sailed for me. And so it's more how do we create this reality for ourselves when we're working with a partner that, I guess partner is a loose term, someone we have to work with to accomplish our goals. So that's how I probably more phrase that question than working with them just across the table, because we're not going to get there.
Any more comments from the board? Questions? Any public comment? Seeing none, what's your requested action?
It is authorize the general manager to execute an amendment to purchase order number 2025-447 with Flowserve to expedite the manufacturing and delivery of the baby well replacement motor in the amount of $58,536.
So moved.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Where are we now? We are 7F, election of board officers. Elect a board president for 2025 calendar year.
Yes, so in accordance with board policy 2050-1, it is now time to elect a board president for 2025 calendar year. So the floor is open. I'll nominate Shane also.
And I'll just add that it's going to be hard to hold the gavel from Dave, but because he's here, I was going to go a different direction if he wasn't. But no, I'm in agreement. I think Shane's doing a great job, and I think it's just one quick comment to the board. I think, as a board member, I felt like, all comments and concerns have always with Dave, with Shane, and with everyone else has been, well listened to and respected. So I think Shane's doing a great job, and, keep him there.
And being groomed.
Yeah, that's right.
Thank you for your confidence.
Let me put the vote out, make sure it's official.
I meant to abstain.
Okay, that motion passes
I did. Committed, man. I'm doing this.
Okay, and again, in accordance with board policy 2050-1, now it is time to elect a vice president for the 2025 calendar year.
I would like to nominate Nick Hayden, vice president.
I will second that nomination.
Oh.
Accept that nomination.
Discussion?
No, I think Nick's doing a great job. I think, yeah, absolutely.
Abstain. All right. Hey, thank you so much for your confidence, and we'll do our best to keep us rolling forward. Okay. Standing ad hoc committees and liaison reports. Start on this side with Nick Haven with ops. We talked a little bit about this throughout the agenda, but
yeah, ops. I think again we had a good ops meeting. Those meetings were definitely fascinating. And I know we are coming up on committee appointments, so I would encourage, I'll put a plug in for the Ops Committee if anybody's interested. It's a good one. We covered a lot of the items today, actually. We talked a lot about Bayview situation. I'm glad to see that develop into maybe even a nearer-term solution and more redundancy. We heard that the clarifier project, where you saw the crane out there for a while, that's starting to near completion and final sign-offs. We were just out there the other day. They're in use and working, so that's great. And we do have staff come in, different staff, and this time it was Jared, who runs our electrical. Great report from him, a lot of hands-on knowledge. definitely was involved in the Bayview pump situation and helped troubleshoot that in terms of finding a different vendor. That could turn it around pretty quick on that rebuild. Yeah, I don't know. What am I saying?
There's some items here that I scratched out. Luther Pass pump was told. Anyway, there's a couple items here. I don't know if you guys want to stand up and talk about those, but no, it was a really good meeting. Went through a lot, and a field trip. I always enjoy the field trips. Anyways, thank you for a really thorough and good meeting on that. I'll mention more about the committee assignments here during the next agenda item. Any other ad hoc committee meeting, etc.? Okay, moving on to 9, board member reports. Just to reiterate, I'll be sending out a letter with respect to committee assignments. If there's anything that you really like to participate in, I'll basically just receive emails or whatever, and we can go through that. But yeah, it's going to be a shuffle into the deck, I think, probably more significantly than previously. So, that's all I got. Any other?
Happy holidays, everyone. Hope everyone has a good, safe holiday season. Yep. Hope it snows. It's like rain. I know.
Okay. Item 10, staff attorney reports for recycled water strategic plan.
Just real briefly, I wanted to let you all know that the comment period for the Recycled Water Strategic Plan has now ended. We've received 2 comments from the public. One was from the Washoe Tribe, from a different group than we had previously met with and gone over in detail. And so that group had been asking for some additional time to provide comment. We gave them a month. We reached out multiple times seeking additional input and never heard anything back after that original request for more time. So with that, we will continue to engage with them if they so desire about, kind of the end results of this strategic plan, the purposes for it, and yeah, we're happy to meet with them at any time. The only other comment that we received from the public, we did respond to in brief, acknowledge the receipt, that it was not directly related to any of the outcomes of the strategic plan or its content, and so we didn't go any further with that one. So with that, the strategic plan is done, and just to give you a little bit of an idea of how we intend to use this this plan in the future. This was a strategic plan, not a master plan. So as a strategic plan, what it did is it laid out pathways for us that we can take when something faces the district that requires us to change our current operations with our recycled water. So that could be a change in water quality requirements. It could be a change in availability of recipients. If rangers decide that they want to get out of the business and are no longer needing irrigation water, it could be any number of things. And so we don't plan on taking any action from any of the recommendations at this moment in time, with the exception of there were a few enhancements to our existing system that came out of this process as recommendations, and we are looking at those and how we can incorporate them into our capital planning. And so the next step for the recycled water systems will be to proceed with a new master plan. And so that is where we will go ahead and look at all of our existing facilities and operations out there. We will proceed with our negotiations with the ranchers, because that contract is coming due in 28-ish. And so we want to get ahead of that and really have our heads wrapped around what are the current and ongoing needs of the facilities as they exist. So We will, for now, be putting this plan on the shelf and turn to it as we need, and then move into this more detailed phase in about a year. We want to get wrapped up with the ongoing water supply master plan that Mark is spearheading before we take staff attention and turn it towards something new. Any questions?
I have one that's kind of more related to the operations, though, out there, just while you're here. I guess I'm looking at Adrian. I'm just curious how our leasee did of our cattle allotment down there, or how did he perform this year? I'm just curious. Did he keep the numbers down?
Actually, I think this year went very well.
Yeah.
I can give you an update in the
Okay.
I don't think we saw the same issue that we saw the year back.
Great. Well, thank you for that.
Well, thank you all for your support throughout this process. I know it's been several years coming, and since we just gave you a full presentation a few weeks ago with, all the gory detail, I didn't want to subject you to that again. But just to say, we're done.
Well, hopefully this strategic plan will help us better formulate a master plan. We've got a lot of the research done, so. Yeah.
I'm glad you made that comment, because as I saw this agenda, I'm like, I think I've seen that presentation. I've been every meeting, yeah, I like that, yeah, exactly.
I just have one quick thing to add. Since we're canceling the January 2nd board meeting, we will be doing updated board photos at the January 16th meeting. So we're asking all of you to show up 15 minutes early, January 16th, wearing whatever your best dress is like.
Flip-flops and board shorts.
As you know, we use these on the website, we use them in the council or the ACFR, various different things, so sometimes we throw products. Anyway, so yeah, that will be on January 16th.
Okay. Paul, General Manager report?
Nothing further for me today, and we have no closed session.
We have no closed session. Does that mean we're done? All right. You didn't make that.
I saw